Week 5 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few plays I look to sell and trade this week. The first play is Stefon Diggs of the New England Patriots. Stefon Diggs, the first 3 weeks of the season, he didn't do much. And then week 4 versus Carolina had his breakout game, 6 catches, 101 yards on 7 targets. I think it was a good matchup, and that's why I went out there, had a good game. We know Drake May's a quarterback that spreads the football out, and in my opinion, Hunter Henry's the number 1 option in this passing game. So to begin the year for Diggs, like I said, not much. Week 1 versus Vegas, 6 catches, 57 yards. Week 2 in Miami, 4 catches, 32 yards. Week 3 versus Steelers, 3 catches, 23 yards, 3 targets. And then week 4, like I said, versus the Panthers, 6 for 106 on 7 targets. So week 5, I know it's a matchup where the juices are going to be flowing. He's going to want to get back at one of his former teams, obviously at the Buffalo Bills, where him and Josh Allen definitely had a beef or something going on over there, and he wants to stick it to them, is Stefon Diggs. And I think that's a reason why as well, besides the great money offers, why he had signed on with this New England Patriot team. So Sunday Night Football here, week 5, like I said, at the Buffalo Bills, his former team. I think Diggs, he's going to want to go out there and have a big game. But like I said, the targets haven't been great for Diggs. Still not 100% coming off an ACL, even though he didn't miss any time, which is pretty good recovery for Stefon Diggs. So maybe he's finally getting his legs under him. But in this offense, he's just not a wide receiver I could trust week in and week out. And coming off a 100-yard game, he's a sell-high player this week. The next player, Marvin Harrison Jr. of the Arizona Cardinals. The same situation in a way for Marvin Harrison, besides coming off an injury, that there'll be some good weeks and some weeks he disappears and doesn't do much. And Kyler Murray, we know he's a run-first type of quarterback. We know he's not that accurate as well at times. And Marvin Harrison Jr. as well, his route running isn't as crisp as you would think it is. Week 1 in New Orleans, 5 catches, 71 yards, a touchdown. Week 2 versus the Panthers, 2 for 27. Week 3 at the Niners, 3 for 44. And then week 4, that first half of the game versus Seattle, he did nothing in the fourth quarter. Late third, early fourth, he turned it on, was Harrison. 6 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown. And the 10 targets, no doubt about it, was a great number. This week, a good matchup versus the Titans. They give up the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. But like I said, in this offense where he's not even the number 1 option and Kyler Murray's going to run the football a whole lot, I think it's tough to trust Marvin Harrison to have good weeks weekly where he puts up, 15, 20 points, where his ceiling for the most part, week points per week, it thinks 10 or 12 fantasy points at most. So this week, even with a good matchup, he's a sell-high play this week. Next player, George Pickens of the Dallas Cowboys. Now Pickens operating as the number 1 wide receiver over there in Dallas after CeeDee Lamb went out in week 3's ball game at the Bears with a high ankle sprain. And he didn't disappoint, no doubt about it. In his debut was the number 1 receiver. Pickens in that crazy shootout 40-40 tie versus the Packers on Sunday night in week 4. 8 catches, 134 yards in that game and 2 touchdowns on 11 targets. So no doubt about it, him and Dak got the rapport down. He's already got on the season is 4 touchdowns in 4 games, which is great. And it is a contract season for Pickens. And this week, a great matchup as well with the New York Jets, where we know their secondary, even with Sauce Gardner back there, isn't all that great. So George Pickens, he's running the routes great. Him and Dak are on the same page. He's operating as the number 1. But let's say CeeDee Lamb, he comes back week 7, week 8. Numbers are going to take a hit. Targets are going to go down. And coming off most likely the best game of the season, it's going to be for Pickens. He's a sell-high play this week. I'm not saying dump these plays for anything, but I'm being realistic. Some of these big weeks, obviously, are going to be the peak for some of these guys. And if you want to make a deal and upgrade, this would be time to sell most of these players. Ginty of the Vegas Raiders. I know a lot of hype with Ginty coming into the season, obviously. He had a monster year in Boise State last season with Ginty, and he came out with a monster game after the first 3 weeks. 2 games under double-digit fantasy points. In week 1, a touchdown on 19 carries for 38 yards. Bailed him out. But week 4 versus the Bears, he went out there and he ran over people. He was breaking tackles, and he looked like a man amongst boys for the first time in the NFL. 21 carries, 138 yards, a touchdown, 2 catches, 17 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a fumble loss. So he did great in the receiving game with the 2 touchdowns. Obviously, was Ashton Ginty. And like I said, in the running game, he was running people over. But this offensive line obviously didn't change. It's not that good. Ginty's not going to have these monster games where I think we're going to see more of a guy scoring 12, 14 points per game. Most weeks is Ginty, which is great. But like I said, after the last 2 weeks, in week 2 and 3, a pedestrian to pretty much non-existent ball game. In week 5, a tougher matchup in Indianapolis, where they're a top 12 defense against the run in fantasy points this season. I think Ginty, this arguably could be the best game he has all season long is Ashton Jeanty, and he's a sell-high running back. Like I said, I don't sell these guys off just for anything, but after coming off a big game where weeks 2 and 3 he didn't do much, and week 1 he averaged 2 yards a carry, definitely someone to sell this week. Next player, Josh Jacobs of the Green Bay Packers. So Jacobs as well, he was off to a slow start. Not as bad as Jeanty. Week 1 versus Detroit, 19 carries, 66 yards, a touchdown, and catch 4 yards. Week 2 versus the Commanders, 23 carries, 84 yards, a touchdown. Week 3 at Cleveland, 16 carries, 30 yards, 5 catches, 44 yards. And then week 4, anytime you see Dallas on the schedule, your players are going to go off most likely. Stats are inflated. At Dallas last week, 22 carries, 86 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 catches, 71 yards. Well, we know he's not much of a receiver out of the backfield. So now with the bye week in week 5, obviously he's not usable for owners. I know great matchup coming up in week 6 versus Cincinnati. But like I said, Dallas can't stop anyone. Stats inflate. And anytime you want a player's value to go up, or you want to put them in the starting lineup and you think they'll have a good game, when you see Dallas on the slate, that's when you make moves as a fantasy owner. Because Dallas, like I said, they can't stop anyone. And all season long, people have been putting up career games or just monster games in general. The next play is his teammate Romeo Doubs of the Green Bay Packers. So Doubs, he's the type of player I've mentioned in other videos. You could pick up off the waiver wire and try to flip in a deal after coming off a monster game at the Cowboys in week 4. 6 catches, 58 yards, and he had the hat trick with 3 touchdowns on 8 targets. I know Jaden Reed, he's going to be out at least another month with the collarbone. Matthew Golden has definitely made some strides over the last couple weeks. Tucker Kraft, a good tight end in that system. But like I said, Dallas was on the slate. He had a monster game, and Doubs, we know he's been an inconsistent wide receiver throughout his NFL career. So with the bye coming up, and like I said, I doubt we see Doubs do that once again this season. I would put him on the trade block and see what you could get for him. And the final play is Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I just don't think this offense has it right now with Liam Cohen, who was obviously an offensive guru and coordinator with the Bucs over the last couple seasons. Now the head coach here with the Jaguars. And yeah, the Jaguars, they're off to a good start, no doubt about it, 3-1 on the season. But Brian Thomas Jr., he's had some drop problems. He's scared to cross the middle of the field, it looks like, of taking a big hit. And it's shown in his stats this season, where week 4 was his best game, and it was a nothing game in my opinion. 5 catches, 49 yards, 7 targets, and a carry for 7 yards. So 3 out of 4 games in PPR leagues, he's failed to reach double digits as Brian Thomas Jr. This week, a tough matchup versus the Kansas City Chiefs coming to town on Monday night. And the other thing, McDuffie's going to be on him, where he's one of the better corners in the league. We've seen him already this season go out there. Zay Flowers, he didn't do much last week until towards the end of the game. We saw in week 3, Malik Neighbors, he only had 2 catches in that ball game. So like I said, McDuffie is the real deal, and Brian Thomas really hasn't done much. And I know his value's way down, but at this point, it might just be a lost season for Brian Thomas, and obviously a bust where a lot of people took him late first, second round. So that's a few players I look to sell and trade for week 5 of the fantasy football season.